The decision to buy your own home or rent one is a choice that's driven by goals that are both 1. Financial and 2. Lifestyle. All the advantages and disadvantages fall within these two categories, and we will look at them one by one in this video tutorial. However, ultimately, there is no right or wrong answer. There only remains the belief in what's right for you, and even that will depend on the timing in your life. So the decision to rent or own is a very personal one, and as you will see, a decision that's driven by emotion as well as reason. It may come as a shock for you to hear that home ownership is not for everyone. Anyone who insists that it is hasn't considered all the facts. Our lifestyles are the product of a range of emotional and rational choices, as well as constantly changing real estate and rental markets. And in this tutorial, we'll explore when and how home ownership has a place in those lifestyles. Having said this, it is a well-known fact that for the vast majority in this country, after careful consideration, homeownership becomes not only their choice, but their American dream. So should you buy or rent? An interesting concept that's often used as a helpful tool is the so-called rent ratio. A home worth $150,000 whose annual rent is $12,000 or $1,000 per month is said to have a rent ratio of 12.5. A $200,000 home which rents for $1,500 a month and therefore $18,000 per year would be said to have a rent ratio of 11.11. According to Moody Analytics, a major global research firm, rent ratios in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s hovered between 10 and 14. The theory is that lower rent ratios mean it's cheaper to own a home than rent it. And going further, the consensus of opinion is that if the rent ratio is below 15, you are usually better off buying. Recently, a New York Times article suggested that a rent ratio of 20 or more means the cost of owning that home would be higher than the cost of renting it. Mathematical formulae and calculators are not flawless, and no one could possibly use the rent ratio concept as anything other than an indicator. So how can the average person weigh the benefits of both renting and owning so as to form a sound conclusion? Let's start by looking at the benefits of renting. Renting is smart for people who are on the go and whose jobs or careers make constant relocation or travel necessary. Signing a lease for 6 to 12 months affords a lot more flexibility and mobility than signing a 30-year mortgage. You can see how lifestyle demand is already at play. Renters can get by with virtually no maintenance because if the plumbing goes bad or the house needs new carpet, their landlord will show up in shining armor to the rescue. Homeowners, on the other hand, will deal with landscaping, repair, and remodel costs for years to come. No one else will bear the burden. It's their home and their responsibility. Through zero-down financing as well as both seller paying closing costs and down payment assistance, many home buyers are finding ways to buy with hardly any out-of-pocket expense. Yet, as a rule, the potentially substantial upfront cost of getting into a home is a deterrent that often makes renting a more viable option. Many apartments can move a renter in with a small deposit and a quick credit check. You might spend a few $100s instead of a few thousand, and many families will choose to rent just because of this. Mobility, freedom from maintenance-related chores, and financial ease of entry. For many people, these three conveniences alone will keep them from considering a home purchase. However, there are many hidden disadvantages to renting that aren't always very obvious. What are they? Renters have no control over rent increases and constantly live under the risk of eviction because their landlord, often unbeknownst to them, could fall behind on mortgage payments to the point of foreclosure. Worse still, landlords often conceal from their tenants the fact they're in danger of losing the property, simply because they want to collect rent from the unsuspecting tenant until the very last moment. In these unfortunate instances, the hard-working, well-paying renter's deposit is often lost as well. The scenario we've just described is an unfair misfortune that follows renters all over the nation every single week. A different type of misfortune that renters cope with is less apparent. It happens with each monthly rent check as renters painstakingly chip away month after month to indirectly create equity for their landlords. Landlords who are in fact homeowners. A renter who spends $1,000 per month from age 30 to his death at, say, age 80 will have spent $600,000 in rent payments. And yet, for all that expense, he will have nothing to show for it, except maybe the return of his rent deposit of a few $100s to a loved one. Equity doesn't follow renters, but it's very likely to follow homeowners. Even though the average appreciation has been around 5% nationally, as noted by the National Multi-Housing Council, buying a home for the sole purpose of equity buildup is questionable. Your home may or may not appreciate in value in the time that you hold on to it, but the longer you hold it, the more likely you are to experience appreciation. Even though historically in our country house prices have risen, there are too many factors that influence what your house value will do. The entrance or exit of a large employer and the consequent population change in your community, zoning changes by the city or county, natural disasters, rise or fall in interest rates, changing lender guidelines like loan limit changes, your neighbors dumping their homes in foreclosure, and a myriad of other factors can drive your home's value up or down. Equity is not a promised land. It's a hope that sometimes becomes a reality. Despite the uncertainty of property appreciation, however, homeowners anticipate that usually after 20 to 30 years, they'll wake up one day to a free and clear home. It can proudly be passed on with equity as an inheritance to their children. This luxury is not something a rent payer can look forward to after 30 years of paying rent. What are some other sometimes hidden disadvantages of renting? Renters live next to more frequently changing complete strangers who become neighbors. This can be especially disconcerting for families with young children. For apartment renters, there's the added challenge of maintaining any sense of privacy while living so close to newcomers and neighbors. Speaking of privacy, many renters complain about the routine inspections their landlords have the right to conduct. You can see how safety and privacy issues often plague renters more than owners. Rent control issues, possible eviction even after timely rent payments, nothing to show for all the money spent, privacy issues, safety issues. What else could make renting less appealing than owning? A recent study in the Dallas, Texas area claimed that 42% of those who moved from apartment renting to buying a home said they did so because they needed more room. Sometimes the absence of sufficient space forces renters to pay for storage units, an additional expense that can usually be avoided by owning a single-family home with a garage or shed. Among all the drawbacks to renting, probably the most tragic is the tax interest write-off on housing payments that renters forfeit. You see, for homeowners, both the interest paid on the mortgage and property tax payments are 100% tax deductible, significantly impacting your take-home pay and your pocketbook. According to the Wall Street Journal, the home mortgage deduction saves Americans $100 billion a year in taxes. The higher your tax bracket, the more you will appreciate this blessing. Be sure to consult a tax professional, since nothing we say here should be considered tax advice. Let's shift gears a little and look at things from a homeownership perspective. We saw how having a mortgage payment brings with it some tax benefits, but an easily overlooked benefit of making mortgage payments is their positive impact on your credit score. The FICO scoring model considers a mortgage the most prized credit trade line you can have. It's far superior to credit cards, auto loans, and finance loans. Rent payments, on the other hand, are not reported unless you are sent to collection for defaulting or breaking your lease. There's no better way to boost your credit score than by having a mortgage payment history listed on your credit report. In a credit-driven economy, your ability to borrow money may dictate what car you drive, whether or not you can grab a financial opportunity when it appears, or even whether your kids make it to college. If wealth and financial security depends on your creditworthiness and ability to borrow money, then owning a home can indirectly get you there quicker. Speaking of borrowing, homeowners who stay long enough in their homes to see equity and maybe even a free and clear home gain the peace of mind that they can borrow against that equity in times of need. Again, this is not a luxury renters can afford. Many have found homeownership as the solution for a stable living environment. It offers children especially the type of comfort zone that influences their development in many positive ways. The U.S. Department of HUD completed a study showing that the children of homeowners scored an average of 9% higher in math and 7% higher in reading ability. And even more startling were the findings that those children are 25% more likely to graduate high school and have a 116% better chance of graduating college. Even though many such discoveries about homeownership make it outshine renting, it has been said that when you line up the total costs side by side, the yearly cost of homeownership is usually higher than renting. How is this possible? Homeowners can have hidden expenses too, like HOA dues, private mortgage insurance, maintenance and repair costs, costs involved with marketing and selling the home when moving away, and potentially rising property taxes. So why do people buy homes? History tells us the primary reason for home ownership is not money-driven at all. For the vast majority of Americans, it's about being able to reproduce their values, beliefs, and likes in a place of their own. To carve out a fortress built by hard work and decorated with individual taste. A place that is a sanctuary of freedom, privacy, and security that essentially becomes an extension of who that individual homeowner is as a person. A family or individual that owns their own home will tell you it's about lifestyle and pride of ownership, as well as a sense of independence. These virtues are yearned for far more deeply than numbers on a page like mortgage interest deduction. Something about the famous Oklahoma land runs of 1889 has stayed with us to this day, that deep down every one of us would love to set down our stakes and own a little piece of America to call our own. Homeowners recognize that owning is in fact an act of settling down or setting down roots, and therefore a statement of stability. Despite the tremendous opportunities for getting into a home today, wisdom would dictate that it's best to hold off on home ownership until you have some measure of financial stability in your life. There is nothing wrong with renting, even if it's considered a phase during which you learn about financial responsibility, build a positive credit profile, and educate yourself for the years of home ownership ahead. Thank you for watching, and be sure to contact the featured real estate professional who provided you with this informative video tutorial.